Beadlocks. In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of beadlock wheels and whether or not you really need them for your rig. Hey everybody, it's Bubba with X's 4x4 and we build badass Jeeps. Today we're going to talk about beadlock wheels. It's something that we get asked about a lot when customers come in shopping for wheels and tires and the initial talks about their build. So we thought it'd be a good idea to make a video on it. As you can see in front of me, I have two wheels. One is a regular run-of-the-mill off-road style wheel, and this here is a trail-ready beadlock wheel that we're putting on this jail build here as we get ready for Baja. So what is the difference in a regular off-road wheel and a beadlock wheel? Let's talk about that. First of all, this is a really nice looking wheel. If you're looking at them on a Jeep, you may not notice the difference right away between this wheel and a beadlock once it's been mounted. It's a bronze paint job on it. It's got this black ring on it. It's got some bolts in it. It kind of simulates what a beadlock looks like. But functionality wise, it's far from what a beadlock really is. Turn it on its side here and we can see exactly where the beads of the tires sit. Super simple to install. We throw them up in the tire machines, we wrap them in rubber, we take them off, we air them up. Pretty inexpensive to install. We normally charge about 30 bucks to mount and balance a tire to a regular wheel or rim, okay, whatever. Let me touch on that for a second. For some reason, that's one of the latest things to argue about on Facebook, the Jeep pages or forums, is that
this isn't a wheel, it's a rim.
What is this?
That's not a can.
That's not a knife.
And I said, that's not a camel.
That's a knife.
That's my wife.
This is also a knife.
A center for ants.
Oh, well, I'll be on my way.
Whatever, okay? Don't beat me up on this in the comments because I call it a wheel. So here we have a beadlock. So turn it on its side. It almost looks like you could run the bead on the inside here, and I guess you can, because I've actually seen very well-known chain tire company that we probably all know actually do that to a set of beadlocks, and we had to take it all apart, dismount the tire from the wheel and remount it properly. Yeah, it looks very much like you could see the bead here, but actually that bead's going to go right here. This side's going to mount just like it would on that. So the inner part of the wheel is going to mount just like a regular tire and wheel combo. But over here, we're going to mount the tire initially onto the wheel, and then we're going to seat the outer bead of the tire. We just take a couple of screwdrivers, we get it seated on there. Then we take the beadlock ring, set it on there, and we start bolting it up. We have a torque sequence that we follow. It's a 5/16 18 bolts. We're running about 23 to 25 foot-pounds of torque on the bolts. Once we get them down there and torqued, you're set. For the first few hundred miles, about every 100 miles, you should go back and check the torque on all the bolts to make sure that they're not coming loose. To this day, I've never had that happen to us, but it's good practice check. One thing I'll mention is, in case you don't see this in the video, is, whoa, check it out. Using some sort of lubricant on the threads as you're doing it. Somebody reached out to me on Instagram and said, hey, if you're using steel bolts and aluminum wheels, you really should be using this stuff called Ultra Tef Gel. This is a anti-corrosion, anti-seize. It's really, really important to use when you're using dissimilar metals such as steel into aluminum. Instead of just using regular old never seize on it, which is probably okay. If you want to step up your game a little bit, it's a great anti-seize compound, and it'll keep that corrosion from taking over inside those wheels and causing some problems down the road. What is the purpose of a beadlock? Now that we've talked about kind of how they operate, what's the point of it? A lot of people like to go off-road. They like to air down the tires a little bit, get a little bit more traction. Typically, what I like to do with the 40-inch tires is I air down between 12 and 10 PSI. Some people go a little bit further. They like to go down to 8, sometimes 5. It really all just depends on the weight of the vehicle. So don't think that just because one person is running 10 PSI when they air down, that you should be running 10 PSI. It really depends on the weight of your vehicle. Because if your vehicle weighs more than theirs and you air down to 10 PSI, you can have similar wheels, similar tires, but since you're heavier, you're gonna be squashing out that sidewall a lot more. It's a little bit more dangerous. And you start going backwards on what you're trying to accomplish. So be very careful about that. We get out there, we air down, we're ready to go off-road. Next thing you know, you're on this, you lose a bead because you got up and you got into some rocks and pushing on them, you got all the weight of your vehicle on there, and the sidewall of the tire caves in and you lose the bead, you lose all your air. Now you got to figure out how to air it up or change the spare out on the trail, and that sucks.
It sucks.
The beadlock, it's going to keep that bead seated in here and squished in between the wheel and this ring and prevent that from happening. You could almost lose all the air in your tire and keep wheeling without losing some traction or unseating the tire bead. That's ultimately what you're going for here. This is one style of beadlock. Now, personally, my favorite style of beadlock is a Hutchinson Rock Monster, and that to me is a true beadlock because it doesn't necessarily use a ring, but it uses a two-piece wheel. Actually, in here, the wheel would separate. You would put it together, but there would be a rubber boot that goes through here and it seals both beads in place. So just because we have this bead pinch doesn't mean that we can't lose this bead on these beadlocks. And I've actually seen that happen. So it's a set of Rock Monsters if you're worried about getting out there and losing both outer and inner beads. I think for most people, this is plenty of beadlock for them, and they feel perfectly fine going out and using it. If they were to lose this bead, there's a couple of tricks you can do to reseat that on the trail. A lot easier if you still have one of the beads seated. If you lose both beads though, it's a lot harder to get that other bead reseated. Some talk about pricing. Let's say that regular off-road wheels are going to run you somewhere around the $200 to $250 range. It just really all depends on what brands you're shopping for and how custom you get with them. Some people want to buy them and powder coat them a different color. Same thing with the beadlock. Our normal price on KMC's beadlocks for customers start around $375 per wheel. Not too bad in terms of beadlock prices, because like these guys right here, these trail readies that were custom built for this vehicle right here, and by custom I mean certain color on them, certain bolts, stuff like that. So these ran up over $500 per wheel. Same with the Rock Monsters. Great beadlock, but I think the average retail price on them is somewhere around $483. So it's definitely not cheap to run beadlocks, but if you go off-road a lot, it's something that you kind of want to invest in for peace of mind when you're off-roading. Pretty wraps up what I got to say about beadlocks. For more off-road videos and other stuff about Jeeping, click right here.